Cardiovascular disorders, they are the number one cause of death globally, amounting to about 1/3 of mortalities around the world. Unfortunately, in India, especially in India, 12 to 16% of the coronary artery disease patients are young, less than 40 years of age. Okay, can we put off this slide because this sort of blinds me a little bit? Is it possible for somebody to switch off these lights? This one. Anyway. There are certain conventional risk factors like diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, certain smoking, certain demographic reasons also, like Dr. Nick pointed out that the Southeast Asian community in the UK has got a higher incidence of coronary artery disease. So the fact is that higher is the risk score, the Framingham risk score, depending on the numbers of these risk factors we have, the higher would be the rate of coronary artery disease. However, in practice we have seen that 60% of those who develop coronary events just have only one or even none of these traditional risk factors. Moreover, more than half of these patients, they have either normal or just mildly increased lipid values. So highlighting the fact that there's something beyond these conventional risk factors which causes these events or the higher cardiovascular events. We know the atherosclerosis is the main culprit which has to be blamed for all these events, and which doesn't only include the cardiac events, but atherosclerosis can also affect the carotid arteries, the major arteries in the body, leading to strokes, can also lead to peripheral arterial disease, can also lead to the renal artery stenosis. So it involves, it's the major culprit. We also know that atherosclerosis is a continuum, it's a continuing process, and it has been shown that it can start at a very, very early age, even at the age of infancy, and then as a continuum progresses till old age. So a child doesn't, or an infant doesn't have hypertension, doesn't have diabetes, is a non-smoker, and then the other conventional risk factors are absent in an infant, but still, the infants may show the evidence of early atherosclerosis in the form of, as you all would be knowing, fatty streaks inside the intima of the artery. So there is something beyond these conventional risk factors. And the latest concept is that this is an inflammatory process which may start at an early age and then progresses. And if you have more and more of these, or addition of these conventional risk factors, the chances of a more aggressive disease you have. So here you see inflammation is now thought to be the main thing which has to be addressed. Well, is it really a new concept? I would say no, because in the mid-19th century, Rudolf Virchow, even at that point of time, he said he defined atherogenesis as an inflammation-based arterial changes as a mechanism of primary importance in atherogenesis. How he could postulate that at that point of time without any modern diagnostic tools, it still surprises me. Well, anyway, let us have a look inside the artery, the lumen of the artery and the intima to understand the basic pathophysiology of atherogenosis and understand the phenomenon of inflammation in the intima. Well, this is the lumen of the artery, this is the lumen of the artery, and this is the arterial wall of the intima. Now, there is this endothelium. The atherosclerosis process starts really because the endothelium, which normally should be impermeable, it becomes permeable because of some factors which lead to endothelial dysfunction. So this is the primary or the first thing which happens in the process of atherosclerosis. A normal endothelium is never permeable. The next step is that an LDL particle, it enters through this now permeable endothelium inside the intima. It gets oxidized by certain of free radicals, superions, and all those things. This presence of oxidized LDL in the intima also leads, or rather this triggers the process of inflammation. And we know that the cells responsible for inflammation are the monocytes or the B lymphocytes. So these cells, they start entering the intima. And here you see an activated monocyte entering the intima. Now this is a protective feature. If you have a toxin anywhere, the monocyte would go there to engulf the toxin and to remove the toxin. But here in the intima, this becomes a vicious cycle, and this is just a process of protection which has gone wrong. Now this monocyte becomes a macrophage. The oxidized LDL is taken inside the macrophage. This incites the process of inflammation. Several such macrophages, when they join, they form a foam cell, which is the most initial part of a atherosclerotic plaque. There is a pathway called the nuclear factor kappa B pathway inside the macrophage, which initiates now the more complex inflammatory mediators or chemokines. Now these are the CRP, the TNF alpha or the tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1, interleukin 6, and several others of them. Now this initiates certain cytokine molecules which are known as adhesion molecules. The vascular cell adhesion molecule 1 or the intercellular adhesion molecule 1. Now these adhesion molecules, they recruit more and more of these monocytes here. So this begins a cycle of inflammation. So just one monocyte at the initial phase, then the initiation of the atherosclerotic or the inflammatory process, and leading to more and more of monocytes entering into the intima, becoming into macrophages, initiation of the NF-kB cycle, and more of foam cells, then fatty streak, and then a fibroproliferative atherosclerotic pathway. We'll discuss about the importance of the NF-kB pathway and another pathway which is a protective pathway, kynurenine pathway, in subsequent slides. So this is basically the basic pathophysiology of atherosclerosis, and here we see the importance of the inflammation. Till now, we have been using the treatment or for atherosclerosis mainly by statins. Now statins, they reduce the levels of LDL cholesterol, we all know that. Now the aim of this session is to talk beyond statins, some certain newer therapies, newer technologies. So I'm not going to discuss in detail about the statin. We also know that the statins, they reduce the event rate for cardiovascular diseases by about 30 to 40%. However, despite the use of maximum statins, still there is a residual risk. We call it as a residual risk of about 70%. So 70% of these patients are not helped by statin, and what we can do for such patients, we'll see in the further slides. I would be highlighting about the anti-inflammatory, certain anti-inflammatory newer therapies in my subsequent slides. Now, another thing is that we have got a proof that atherosclerosis is an inflammatory disease, because in these patients of the vascular disease, we see a rise in certain inflammatory markers. However, the most important and the easiest to do is the CRP, which is very well recognized these days as a marker for atherosclerosis. Of all these inflammatory markers, as you see, the interleukin 6 or the ICAM or serum amyloid A, the HS-CRP, the high sensitive CRP, seems to be the most sensitive test to pick up the evidence or to pick up the early atherosclerosis. And if combined, if HS-CRP level is combined with the ratio of total cholesterol to HDL cholesterol, this becomes more sensitive. Moreover, it has been seen that at any level of Framingham risk score or at any level of LDL cholesterol level, if the CRP level is elevated, it denotes a higher risk to develop a cardiac event in future. And the importance of reducing the CRP levels was very well demonstrated by a trial which is known as the Jupiter trial, where a statin, a high-dose statin, rosuvastatin, was used in otherwise normal patients, healthy patients with not high levels of cholesterol, an LDL level of less than 130, and who were non-diabetics. But those patients who had just had an elevation of the hsCRP level beyond 2 mg/%, it showed there was a marked reduction of the primary endpoints by 44%. So that means the patients who do not have a couple of these conventional risk factors, but a high level of CRP, indicating that there's probably some ongoing inflammation going on, if they are given high dose of statin, the overall mortality over a period of around 5 years is reduced by about 45%. So this is the importance of paying attention to the inflammatory process of atherosclerosis. Now we all know the current strategies are statins, the ACE inhibitors and the ARBs. They also have been shown to reduce the inflammation a little bit, but there are certain other novel targets, and a couple of them targeting at the inflammatory process, the others not really at the inflammatory process, but certain newer, we should be aware of what's going on in the field of to modify the lipid and the lipoproteins. So first of all, what's new in low density or the LDL cholesterol? Statins are there, they're going to stay here. There have been several trials on several treatment modalities to reduce the LDL-C levels, but two main therapeutic strategies which are in news now are the cholesterol absorption inhibitors like ezetimibe, and another very potent drug to reduce the levels of LDL cholesterol level is the new drug which is known as the which are known as the PCSK9 inhibitors. Well, ezetimibe, as we all know, is and will be the only cholesterol absorption inhibitor in clinical use. However, there was a trial by the name of IMPROVE trial, which was published a couple of years ago, and which shows that ezetimibe, earlier it had gone into disrepute, but recently an IMPROVE trial has shown that ezetimibe, if added to a statin post-MI, can lead to reduced event rates in future. Other modalities of treatment to reduce the LDL, like squalene synthase inhibitor and the thyroxine receptor agonist, they have failed to show any benefit. Now, what exactly are PCSK9 inhibitors? They are the most promising drugs for the future. Now, before we understand what is a PCSK9 inhibitor, we should understand a little bit about the LDL receptors which are available or which are present on the surface of the liver cell. So this is a liver or a hepatocyte. You see there are certain receptors on the surface of the hepatocytes. These are known as LDL receptors. Now the purpose of these receptors is to bind with the circulating LDL-C, and then it is metabolized inside these hepatocytes. So more LDL receptors you have on your hepatocyte surface, more LDL cholesterol from your bloodstream is going to be taken up by the liver and metabolized and then removed from the body. However, there are certain substances or certain enzymes which are known as the PCSK9. Now these substances which you see here in orange color, sometimes these occupy the LDL receptors, and the free LDL, which is moving around in the bloodstream is not able to be accommodated on these receptors. So there is more of an LDL-C cholesterol floating in the blood. Now what do these PCSK9 inhibitors do? Now this is this three-armed thing is being depicted as a PCSK9 inhibitor. What it does is it joins or it picks up these PCSK9 and now makes the LDL receptors free. Now because this is a bigger molecule and it cannot fit onto these LDL receptors. So now the PCSK9 is freed from these LDL receptors, and now more LDL receptors are available on the surface of the liver cells for metabolizing the circulating LDL cholesterol. Now, what is the latest about high density lipoprotein? We also know that lower the HDL level, higher the rate of atherosclerosis or cardiovascular events. As of now, there are not too many medicines to increase the HDL level excepting niacin. However, niacin again went into disrepute because of a trial conducted a couple of years ago which showed that the use of niacin increases the rate of the cerebrovascular events. So most of us are not using niacin for patients with low HDL. In certain cases with very bad cholesterol levels, it may be used. However, there have been a couple of small trials done recently which show that maybe niacin can be safe. It has also been shown that the extended release niacin and liraglutide combination may be a little safer. Now, another new thing or the newer strategies in management of low HDL levels is the CETP inhibitors, or the cholesterol ester transfer protein inhibitors. There are 4 of them: enacetrabib, dalcetrabib, evacetrabib, and torcetrabib. Now, what does this CETP stand for? This is cholesterol ester transfer protein, and the importance is that it takes triglycerides from the VLDL particles, puts them into HDL particles and the LDL particles. The LDL particles are made into more small and dense LDL particles which are more atherogenic. Also, the HDL particles become smaller and they are excreted or they become smaller. The CETP inhibitors, what they do is they prevent the action of this enzyme, and the triglycerides are not transferred from VLDL into HDL or LDL. More of HDL is now available. It's not excreted out, and the LDL particle doesn't become small. So it reduces the levels of the LDL cholesterol. As I said, these 3, dalcetrabib, evacetrabib, torcetrabib, they have not been shown to have any major outcome benefits, though they have been shown to be very good medicines to reduce the LDL cholesterol and to improve the HDL levels, but the outcome trials have not been very, very favorable. This one medicine, enacetrabib, it appears to be little more promising. Certain trials are going on. This is the DEFINE trial. It showed that it can reduce the LDL-C levels by about 40% and improve the HDL-C levels by a remarkable 138%. But still the outcome data is yet to be released, but the initial reports are very promising. So this is the only CETP inhibitor remaining in our for future testing. Another trial which is testing the enacetrabib is the Heart Protection Study 3 TIMI55, or the REVEAL trial, where a very huge number of patients are going to be enrolled for this enacetrabib, and then we'll see whether this is really helpful or not. What I feel is that the real battle in the future will be between the PCSK9 monoclonal antibodies, and if the results of the REVEAL trial are favorable, then the real battle would be between these two. Now, the limitations of PCSK9 is that it has to be given in subcutaneous form. imagine a patient of dyslipidemia getting a subcutaneous injection for improving his LDL levels every fortnight. This is not a once in a while injection, it's a fortnightly injection. Second limitation is that it is very, very costly. A monthly treatment with PCSK9 would cost us about 60 to 70,000 rupees a month. Imagine about 10 lakh rupees per annum for LDL level reduction. This PCSK9, this is available now in Europe by the name of Repatha, and it has been approved in United Kingdom and in Austria. And I have come to know that many physicians in Europe, they have started using PCSK9 inhibitors in some of their patients. Another important strategy to improve the HDL levels would be, as we all know, that the HDL is an ApoA1 lipoprotein. So one could use ApoA1 mimetics in these patients. There have been studies to give HDL, a reconstituted HDL cholesterol by intravenous injection to improve the HDL levels. But these trials are in a very, very preliminary stage. The limitations are that they have to be given intravenously quite frequently. So this also is not very, very practical. I would just like to mention about a very interesting HDL particle, which is known as HDL Milano or ApoA1 Milano. There have been, now this HDL was discovered a couple of years ago, and this is known as Milano HDL because it was researched in the University of Milan. And interestingly, this cholesterol, the HDL cholesterol particle, even though it is present in very, very small quantities, it has got a very, very high atheroprotective values. So even if you have got a little bit of ApoA1 Milano or HDL Milano in your circulation, you can be free of atherosclerosis. Now, interesting thing is that this HDL Milano was discovered by chance by certain researchers who found that in one particular village in Italy, which had just a population of 1,000 people, they had a very, very low level of HDL, but they didn't have any evidence of atherosclerosis. So they researched and they found that some people, they had a genetic mutation which was called as an ApoA1 Milano genetic mutation. And it was traced back to late 18th century to just one person in whom this mutation had occurred. So they could, imagine they could trace the person in which this mutation had occurred. And his name was Giovanni. Anyway, the problem is that you can use this HDL Milano as an atheroprotective agent, but it requires, again, a weekly injection intravenously. Pfizer was doing a trial on this medicine, but they found it to be very, very expensive, so they halted this trial in 2003. There are certain other treatment modalities which are in development for improving or reducing the triglyceride levels, but they are all under investigative and nothing can be commented on them because nothing great has come out of the outcomes. Now, how can you target the inflammatory pathways of atherosclerosis? As I said, there is a pathway known as a kynurenine pathway, which is going on inside the inside the intima of the vessel cells. One of the byproducts of this kynurenine cyclase is 3-HAA, 3-hydroxyanthranoic acid. This is very, very atheroprotective because it blocks the NF-kB pathway, which leads to release of pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines. So now this could be a drug of future, the 3-HAA, 3-hydroxyanthranoic acid. It is an activator of, it inhibits the activation of nuclear factor Kb. It has got very strong antioxidant properties also. Now, these are some studies which have been done which show that it is very effective in reducing the plasma cholesterol, triglyceride, reduction in VLDL, and improves the HDL levels. It reduces the inflammatory markers or the inflammatory T cells in atherosclerotic lesions, and certain studies in animals, in mice, they have shown regression of the atherosclerotic plaque if they are given the 3-HAA. Another pathway in the cells, please pardon me if I'm taking a little long time, but just 5 minutes, just 5, because this is a lengthy topic. So another pathway is the NFKB pathway, which, as I said, when it is activated, it facilitates the inflammatory process. Now, to inhibit this pathway, can you imagine there's a new medicine, there's a new therapeutic strategy which is coming, which is a molecule which is known as curcumin, which can inhibit this NFKB pathway and prevent atherosclerosis or reduce atherosclerosis. And surprisingly, this curcumin molecule is formed from or taken from turmeric, haldi. So this is very, very important. What curcumin does is it blocks the NFKB pathway, and so that the pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines are not released, and it halts the inflammatory process. So there are several other promising therapies also, like the use of cyclosporin or colchicine or methotrexate and certain other medicines which may be used to prevent atherosclerosis. So to conclude, despite optimum therapy with current drugs, especially the statin, still 1/3 of the low-risk individuals with 0 or even 1 Framingham risk score, they have known to develop a cardiovascular disease. Tackling inflammation provides the potential to improve cardiovascular outcomes further. And some molecules targeting inflammation are being developed to provide a unique addition to the cardiovascular armamentarium, especially the 3-HAA and curcumin, which is derived from a very, very simple herb, turmeric. Thank you so much.